When I say sun, you say dance, son. Son.
One word to describe Sundance.
Fantastic.
Special.
Amazing.
Moist.
Sundance feels like home because it really centers that artistic spirit, that creative spirit that this place is all about.
It's really nice to have a community that accepts my work and accepts me.
Being here is insanely special. I've been crying all week.
For me, it's all risk. All of these independent filmmakers, every editor, every actor is risking something when they make art and they present it to the world.
We have been watching this build.
That's why Sundance is so important.
Come out and break down the stereotypes.
Nobody tells the whole truth.
All I ask is that they take their feet off our necks.
Looks like someone has a crush.
Whoa, what?
You didn't know?
Form crazy relationships at this festival, and I hope to stay in touch with for the rest of my life.
You are awesome.
Keep on pursuing the truth. You know you're an actor.
I've always been a big admirer of the festival. I follow it every year.
I always just go for the good story.
I want to do good stories too.
I really think we should take the show on the road.
Sundance has been a 360 hub to my creative soul.
For me, that's essential.
Independent cinema.
Independent.
Wow, standing ovation again!
Okay, bye.
Welcome to AIPT's recap of the Sundance Film Festival. This year's Sundance was probably the most unique one ever. It was a hybrid event. It was virtual, which is how we saw it, but it was also held in satellite theaters around the country. So this edition of Sundance was open to potentially more people than it ever has been before. We have a list of movies that we saw. We saw quite a number of movies. So we have a list of movies that really stood out to us that we wanted to talk about today. So my name is Nathaniel Muir. I'm the movie editor at AIPT. And I'm joined by Regina, who is one of the movie contributors. How are you doing today, Regina?
Good, thanks.
So my first question would be, what did you think of the platform?
Well, I've never actually been to a physical film festival because of COVID when I was about to go to one, it happened. So, but I think for Sundance, I think it was a really awesome way to go about this because you were able to see all these movies. And I mean, there was just so much to see. There's a lot to juggle. And I think this kind of made that a little bit easier. And I mean, the quality was very good viewing wise. So, I mean, I have no complaints. It was a good experience.
Yeah, it was a really easy experience. My only complaint, and it has nothing to do with the platform that they use, is that I didn't get to attend any of the events. And it wasn't because that I was locked out of them or anything, or that I couldn't sign up for them. It's just it was so easy to see the movies that I kept seeing movie after movie. Whereas if it were physical, you would have to plan your day and go to the events and whatnot. So movie-wise, what was your favorite movie?
I had a couple, but I think the one I kind of needed to see was probably How It Ends, just because it was so, it was such an interesting story, but it was also very funny, and I think we all could use some laughs right now. And it was a really fun watch. Directed by Daryl Wayne and Zoe Lister-Jones. Zoe Lister-Jones also stars in the film as Liza. She's a young woman living on her own, except she's accompanied by her inner child, which is little Liza. And that's just it's quirky and it's a fun idea, but it's actually like really moving. But it's about the end of the world. So everyone's getting ready to figure out how to plan their last day on Earth. And it could be a very grim thing, but everyone's sort of like, well, it's happening, and they're just kind of figuring out how to go about their day. And I really appreciate sort of the absurd humor of it all. There's lots of really great cameos too. Lamorne, what's his last name? From New Girl, Winston from New Girl, Lamorne, and there's Charlie Day and Glenn Howerton, and there's just
Colin
a lot
Hanks and Olivia
Colin
Wilde and Nick Kroll. Like the How It Ends is a really good movie. It's a really uplifting movie. I think some people will not like it because it does have an overarching plot, but it is a series of sketches, really. Series of meetings, series of encounters. The important thing to remember about How It Ends, it's a very good movie. I thought it was a great movie, and everything you said is absolutely true. While it doesn't directly deal with the pandemic, there's lots of shots of her walking through Los Angeles, completely empty streets. Everyone's kind of secluded, so it does give you that feel without directly addressing it. But and the important thing to remember is the movie was built out of Zoom improv sessions. Like it was just them, like Zoe Lister-Jones and a bunch of friends getting together, kind of messing around, and they made a movie out of it. And in parts of the movie, it's obvious that they've social distanced and they weren't together and things like that. But yeah, you're absolutely correct about the movie. Very uplifting, very fun, very silly, absurd. Yeah, there's the word you use, a great word. And yeah, it is perfect for this time. Definitely perfect for this time. My favorite movie was the closer, actually, was Judas and the Black Messiah. An excellent movie. I believe they did the premiere at Sundance in order to make it eligible for the Oscars. And I mean, based on the performances and the story, I think we're going to be hearing a lot about this movie in the next few weeks.
Definitely. Lakeith Stanfield, Daniel Kaluuya, Danielle
Dominic Fishback.
Yes, Dominic Fishback. I mean, these were all like stellar performances. So I mean, it's gonna really I think that's gonna be all the Oscar buzz.
Absolutely, it's coming to HBO Max and theaters on February the 12th. Directed by Shaka King. Just a beautiful hotel. It's about Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Daniel Kaluuya, who I believe was nominated for Get Out. If not, then he definitely deserves one for this, because as you and I were watching it, I asked you, does he really sound like that? Because his voice, his inflection, his charisma, the magnetism, it's amazing what he does with the character.
Yeah, I believe somewhere in the interviews you mentioned something about the cadence, like the way the Fred Hampton spoke was sort of like poetry, and it's kind of a point that's made in the film too, and I think that's really great how he conveyed that.
And what I like about it, so I like a lot of things about it, but the title, Judas and the Black Messiah, it immediately makes you think that it's a story about two people, when in actuality, when you watch it, and very minor spoiler, there's very little interaction between the two, like direct interaction between the two. It's really a story of two people and two lives. And of course, the movement in general and the change in America. Just an amazing movie all around. I mean, Jesse Plemons has a part. Martin Sheen is in it. Very good movie. Very topical movie. There's parts of it, much of it, that still rings true today. So it's a very powerful watch. And I think that not only will it get Oscar buzz, but it'll deservedly win a bunch of awards, I feel. So both of us are horror fans. So, of course, we couldn't get away from horror movies. And they actually have a whole section at Sundance devoted to horror genre films. They have a midnight section. So Sundance isn't necessarily known for their horror, but they've had stuff like Blair Witch come out of there. So, I mean, horror is no stranger to Sundance. So we saw two in particular that I think we kind of had similar opinions on. The first one we saw was 8 for Silver.
Yes, and that was directed by Sean Ellis. And so this is kind of a very original spin on the werewolf film. So, I mean, if you like werewolf movies and period pieces, this is definitely the film you're going to want to check out.
It's interesting because it's very much a werewolf story. Like, it has gypsies, it has a curse, it has the gothic atmosphere, the moody setting. It's set on the English countryside. It's foggy. Like, everything that you would expect from a werewolf story, it's there, except the creature itself.
And it has all the gore, which is pretty great. I mean, it's sort of almost beautiful, I would say, in its disgustingness.
It's really neat too, because it does things with the genre, it does things that you would expect, flips it on the head. So it's like watching this movie, it'll constantly surprise you. Constantly, it will surprise you. We stayed around for the Q&A afterwards because they showed that afterwards. And Sean Ellis, his whole thing was he did not want to make a werewolf movie. He happened to bring in elements of it, and it's very noticeable in the movie. But I think he did a very good job of making a non-werewolf movie.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very the creature is definitely very unique. And the film itself has a very distinct feel. So while it is like a your monster movie fare, it's a different experience, and I think it sort of all blends together, like the mixing the folklore and time, the sensibilities of that time. It's just a really good story.
So you mentioned the creature. You call it unique. Good or bad? What did you think of the creature?
Good. Stuff and nightmares.
Scary, incredibly scary looking thing. I thought it kind of leaned towards the sci-fi kind of in its inspiration, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. It's wholly unique to this particular genre of horror.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, I mean, it's a movie set like in what, like the 1800s, that type of time era. But the monster itself feels very modern and sort of futuristic in its design.
Yeah, very much so. An excellent movie, and hopefully people will get a chance to see that one. The other one we saw is something that we've talked about. Now, neither of us, I'll put words in your mouth and correct me if I'm wrong, but neither of us are a fan of the rape and revenge movies of the 70s, the exploitation ones, I spit it on your grave type of stuff. They are well known for, very bad reasons, but those movies are known. But yeah, and there's a subgenre of them, and they're awful. But last year, especially, it seemed like there was a new wave, I guess, of female revenge movies. They've been, I would say, very good. Very, very good. So we got to see one that debuted, or that screened at Sundance. It's a Canadian movie, Violation. This was, I thought, and I don't know if you agreed with me entirely, I thought there were a lot of nods. I don't want to call them homages, but there was a lot of nods to directly I Spit on Your Grave, actually. That you really get that vibe in it, but told from a female's point of view. What did you think of Violation, knowing that you don't like the genre?
You know what, Violation, what I appreciate about the movies that have been coming out lately, Hunted, Alone, these movies that kind of like are subverting the genre. What I like about the female revenge movie is that these movies are actually focusing on the revenge. They are celebrating the revenge and not so much like the let's watch rape for 30 minutes. It's more about like the focus is the vengeance, and that's what we're getting here. So there's some very interesting things done with this film, with the character, whereas some films have been told through the male gaze. This is completely through the female's gaze, through the victim's gaze. And some of the directing by Madeline Sims Fewer is pretty amazing, I would say. Like, there's parts that are very kind of out of focus and blurry, and I think that's great because it's sort of like this is what's happening, this is a catalyst, but this is not what we're going to focus on because the things that we do need to see are very vivid and they're very graphic, and that's what the film is supposed to be about. And I think it's very different when you tell a movie from one perspective versus the other perspective, and that's the perspective we should be watching these stories from.
No, absolutely. You bring us Madeline Sims Fewer plays the main character in Violation. It's also directed with Dusty Mancelli, so it was two directors for this film. You bring up a lot of good points. First of all, the fetishizing of the rape. In this movie, and again, mild spoiler, there's a rape scene. It's a sexual assault, but the way it's shot, it's not romantic. It's not sexy. It's not. It's actually done in a way that it's even really hard to tell what's going on. Now, in the context of the story, you do know what it is, but if you were just walking by, or if you just look at it, even knowing what's going on, you can't tell what it actually is. It's the context clues that let you know what's going on. So I really appreciated the way that that was done because while the act in and of itself was disgusting, it wasn't as viscerally as disgusting as stuff like Last House on the Left is. What I also appreciated about this movie, and you're not just a horror fan like of recent years, you've watched movies from way back when. So one of the mainstays of horror is the objectification of women. This goes from how they dressed way before there was nudity back in the Hammer films to up until the 80s when you would have, a lot of times a fully nude woman being slaughtered by a fully clothed man. In Violation, you get the exact inverse of that. You have a fully clothed woman taking advantage of a completely naked man, and it's disgusting, like you said. It's brutal, but in a way, it's kind of satisfying too.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it is satisfying, and I mean, it does turn it on its head, right? I mean, it is this whole like we grew up with these movies, right? Where it's like it's almost like the punishment, right? You get naked, you're gonna die. It's just like a logical stream of events in films, right? So same rule applies here, just differently.
Yeah, just so from a different point of view. So very well done. I thought it was a really good movie. I enjoyed it very much. It's flawed, like it's not perfect, but it's absolutely enjoyable. Especially if you're a fan of horror, you'll absolutely love this movie. One of the movies that both of us were really looking forward to, and it was a documentary, and it was as much for personal reasons as it was for the story itself, the topic itself. But At the Ready. It's a documentary about Horizon High School, and specifically, it's about the Criminal Justice Club there. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Horizon High School or El Paso, Texas, the reason that that's so important and interesting is the movie focuses on Mexican American students at a high school that's about 10 miles from the Mexico United States border. So, first of all, I know you had lots of expectations going into it, as much personal as a filmmaking wise. What did you think of At the Ready in general?
I think At the Ready brings up some very interesting discussion points that are very relevant to the El Paso community. El Paso is right on the border. It's the closest thing to it is Juarez. You can get to Juarez in 5 minutes. A lot of students come from Juarez daily to come to school in El Paso. So having, watching all these films, having been a teacher in Juarez, in El Paso, you do come up with these discussions, with these so how do you feel about immigrants crossing the border? How do you feel about the words that the administration throws out, that kind of rhetoric? How do you feel when they demonize immigrants who are just trying to come over here to, for a better life? And it's very interesting, the kind of conversations you're going to have in that classroom, because you're going to be very surprised by some of the things that the students say. Obviously, some are for it, but you'd be, which is just like, which will surprise you. Really, it'll always jar you, and then some are against. And I think this documentary does a very good job of just sort of bringing that those discussions, that mindset, and how impressionable students are, especially when you're looking for a career, when you grow up a certain way and you're looking for success. And it's about teachers' influence, and it's just about so many things. It's about education, and I just think it brings up a lot of very interesting points about life on the border in general.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Now, obviously, because where it's shot, it did deal with border issues. Surprisingly to me, and this was a good thing, I like how it focused on three characters, and arguably, it was more about family than it was about border issues, and I enjoyed that very much. I thought the three characters were awesome, even though I didn't always agree with some of the things they were saying. I thought they were really cool character, or not characters. I thought they were really neat people. They were very interesting subjects. I enjoyed watching them live their lives and make their decisions and changes in their lives. I thought it was a really cool, down to earth documentary. Also, credit to the director, Macy Crow. Now, she talked about it afterwards, and it's I did an interview for her. It's up on the site. We live in a very partisan era, very partisan. There isn't a thing that you can do today that will not involve politics in some way. And this movie, even though it covers Bethel's Run, it is a nonpartisan movie. At least I felt that it was. What did you think that also?
I thought so too, and it does deal with politics. It does show, we do hear Trump's rhetoric. We do see Ted Cruz, as we see Beto O'Rourke, and we do see the politics happening. But at the same time, though, that's sort of like creating the context. What we do focus on is these students and how they're trying to navigate what they want to do with their lives after high school, how they interact with their family, and like you said, family is such a huge part of it. And it's about them trying to figure out their priorities and what matters the most. And it's really interesting to see how some students change, what influences them growing up, and then how, as they start to become their own person, how they take that, who they are, and still have to, how do they become who they want to be and still be who their family knows them to be? If that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. It's a real life coming of age story.
Definitely.
It's basically what it is. So we saw a lot of things together, but we also had the opportunity to kind of go off on our own and see things that we saw. We saw things by ourselves. So, what were some of the things that you got a chance to see that really stood out to you?
I saw some very interesting shorts. I have a couple that stood out to me. There's a few actually, but one I really, really liked was BJ's Mobile Gift Shop, and I just thought that one was so great. It's about a young Korean American and who's trying to make a living, and he makes a living out of his red suitcase that he wheels around Chicago. And it's kind of amazing. Anything you could possibly want, if you forgot something at home, he has it. And he's gonna sell it to you at full price, and it doesn't matter because you need it and he's got it. So it's the basic supply and demand principle, and it's just very much it's his job. He's the CFO, he's the CEO of his own company. He's living his American dream, and it was just a very funny story, directed by Jason Park, and it stars Johnny Boy Tellum, and he's great. He in it, like he's so charismatic, and the story is just so wonderful and heartwarming. This also has to do a lot with family as well, but it's also a lot about individuality and sort of like making your own path. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that one I saw when they released the lineup. Partially because I'm Korean, but partially just because it sounded really cool. I wanted to get it to see that, but unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to see that one.
I also saw another one called Bambarak, and this is about a father and daughter who are just in from Afghanistan. They're in a new country trying to make their way. And the daughter decides she's going to stow away in her dad's delivery van, and he's got no choice but to kind of take her around with him on his first day at work. He's not happy with her, but as the day goes on, it's a really great story about fathers and daughters and sort of kind of like seeing, I mean, it's sort of relatable in a way. Everyone, when they see like their parents outside the home, and they become like a whole new person to them. And same for parents looking at their kids. It's a very interesting story about sort of like learning who your family really is. It's heartwarming. It's a little bit sad. Being immigrants, they do face some discrimination. And it's kind of about that moment where you realize that maybe just your parents aren't going to have your back all the time. So it was a very interesting story, and I think it's one of the more important stories that were told.
Sounds good. That sounds really, really cool. I had an opportunity. There was a lot of documentaries. That's lots of documentaries. So I want to say it's one of the first things I saw, if not the first thing I saw, was Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, directed by Amir Thompson, who you might know is Questlove from The Roots. An excellent, excellent movie about the Harlem Cultural Festival that took place in 1969. It was a series of musical concerts that was recorded, but they never found distribution for them. And the documentary goes into it, and they go into why. Just an excellent document. It's part of it's like a concert film. Like there's performances from B.B. Hooker, Stevie Wonder is in Gladys Knight and the Pips. Like just this Sly and the Family Stone. Just this amazing stuff that you're seeing. The thing that really struck me about the documentary is literally the opening seconds is they start playing footage that you can't see, and there's a black man watching it, and they tell him, like, do you remember this? And he starts looking at the footage, and this look of awe and amazement, and you can see like the memories kind of flooding him, and he gets teary-eyed watching it. Immediately you're like caught up in the moment, and you're caught up in this feeling and this emotion. It goes into black fashion. music trends. It's also taking place. The reason that this all took place was there was the 60s for, all that they're known for, all the peace, love, and hippie stuff that they're known for. There was also the assassinations of JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy. So by the time 1969 rolled around, people were worried that there was going to be some, fire in the riots all over the place. So the Harlem Cultural Fest was kind of a way to counter it. Amazing movie that I'm sure will be out there for everyone to see. The other thing that I saw, which I think might not be as easy to find, it's a movie called Pleasure by Nina Steinberg, and with the first-time actress in it, Sophia Capel. She plays a woman named Bella Cherry, who's come from Sweden to Los Angeles. They become when she comes into LA, they ask her for business or pleasure. She says for pleasure. She wants to become the biggest adult film star in the world. It's the cast is mainly porn stars, so they're used to improvisation with the films that they do. So this movie has a very improvisational, naturalistic feel to it. The dialogue, it's very normal, and it almost seems unscripted at times because it just seems like people hanging out and talking. It's very normal, very free flowing. It is incredibly frank. It's very graphic. So it's definitely not for everybody, but it's such a good story. It's in a way it is another coming of age story. It's dark in ways, and it deals with, female empowerment, a very shady business, expectations, self-identity, all that stuff that you would figure factors into it. Those are just some of the movies that we saw at the Sundance Film Festival. If you go up on the site, you'll see a review for all of the movies that we saw. They're all on there. There's interviews on there. Please check it out, and we will see you for South by Southwest.